Hello everyone. As we start now discussing about antimicrobial agents that apply to medical setups, it's very important for us to understand a few terminologies about control of microorganisms. Let us begin with the very first term, which is sterilization. I have mentioned about this term called sterile. Sterile comes from a Latin word sterilis, which basically means unable to produce offsprings. So it is basically a technique wherein you are killing all living cells, their spores, or even acellular forms like viruses. Some bacteria, when the condition becomes unfavorable, they produce spores, which are inactive forms of bacteria, which tend to survive extreme conditions as well. But there are some methods by which you can even kill these inactive forms called spores. So sterilization is a process by which you kill all kinds of microorganisms, irrespective of whether they are in their active or inactive forms. So when you use the word sterile, it basically indicates it's free of any microorganisms. It has no microorganisms on it at all, irrespective of active or inactive form. And the chemical agent that you make use of to achieve sterilization is what we call as a sterilant. So whatever chemical agent you use to get sterilization done, you are referring to that agent as sterilant. Let us now go to the next term, which is disinfection. This is a very commonly used term, isn't it? During COVID, we heard a lot of this. Disinfection is killing, inhibition, or removal of microorganisms. I don't have to explain you what killing means, but I'll surely tell you what inhibition means. Inhibition basically means you're not killing those microorganisms, you are just stopping them from growing further. So you're not killing them, they are still alive, but they can't multiply. So they will not be able to cause an infection further. Or disinfection could be mere removal of microorganisms also. Okay? Which could be just like, not killing them, but separating those cells out. The primary goal of disinfection is to destroy pathogens, which means infection-causing microorganisms are to be destroyed. So disinfection, this term itself tells you the meaning. You want to remove infectious agents. But in a way, disinfection reduces the total microbial population in general, irrespective of whether they are pathogenic or not. But the major goal thereout is to remove the pathogens first. So the chemical agent that you make use of to bring about disinfection, you call them as disinfectant. And normally disinfectants are used on inanimate objects like your tables, desks, floors, any non-living surfaces that you want to clean so that there are no microorganisms over it, then you make use of disinfectant. You normally don't use a disinfectant on human or living organisms based surfaces. A disinfectant will not bring about sterilization. That's the difference between sterilization and disinfection. In sterilization, you were saying that it kills all microorganisms. Disinfection doesn't do that. Disinfection is just going to reduce the microbial load. It's not going to remove all microorganisms there. It's just going to reduce the number. That's the difference between disinfection and sterilization. Let's talk about sanitization. Sanitization is often confused with disinfection because they are very closely related to each other. This is then another term which I'm sure you would have heard of, during COVID pandemic. In sanitization, you are reducing the microbial levels again. So it is different from sterilization because you are not killing all microorganisms, you are just bringing the number down. So the question arises, how is this then different from disinfection? So in sanitization, you are reducing the number of microorganisms to a level which is regarded as safe by the public health standards. So public health standard would say that in air, this should be the number of microorganisms. So this reduction that you carry out is done by a process called as sanitization. So sanitizers are normally used to even, clean eating utensils in restaurants because there is a requirement that the utensils in which you serve food in restaurants, it should have microbial load less than this. So then you are basically carrying out sanitization because you have to meet that requirement that has been put up by the public health standards. Right? Now we go to another topic which is called antisepsis. This is again something which is normally confused with disinfection. Anti is against, sepsis is putrefaction or degradation. So when you apply a chemical agent on a living surface to prevent infection or sepsis from taking place, you call that process as antisepsis. So when you are hurt, you have a bruise on your skin, you have a wound, and you use Dettol there to, in order to prevent infection from taking place, that process is what you call as antisepsis. And the agent that you're making use of for this purpose becomes an antiseptic. An antiseptic is different from a disinfectant because an antiseptic can be used on a living organism's body. So this is applied to tissue in order to prevent infection. It can either kill the microorganism or it can stop the microorganism from multiplying. Okay, so they reduce the total number of organisms in a way. Now there are some agents in the market which can act as both disinfectant and antiseptic. So they are used for both. They are used for cleaning the wounds also. They are used for cleaning the floor also because they are safe. So you end up using them as both. But there are some which are toxic to living organisms. So you can't use them as antiseptics. You have to use them only as disinfectants. Okay? So this difference has to be known. Because if you're using an agent that is toxic to you also, it's going to harm you. Right? And hence, it is essential to understand the difference between antiseptics and disinfectants. Next comes chemotherapy. This is a very interesting concept, let me tell you. Chemotherapy is very confused term, all thanks to the way it has been put up in front of common masses. Because when we use the term chemotherapy, what comes to our mind first is cancer treatment. But let me tell you that whenever you use a chemical agent for therapeutic purposes, you refer to it as chemotherapy. So if you go to the doctor gives you a medication for headache, you are on chemotherapy. Every chemotherapy or chemotherapeutic strategy doesn't refer to cancer. It's a general terminology. So if a physician gives you some chemical as medication, you are on chemotherapy. So it's always better, if you want to link it to cancer, refer to it as cancer chemotherapy and not just chemotherapy. Because when you are suffering from an infection and you are consuming a medicine, you are on chemotherapy only. Understand this. So it's not synonymous to cancer treatment always. Keep this in mind. This is a very, big misconception that people have. So in this video, we have discussed 5 significant terminologies. Sterilization, which means killing all microorganisms. So it's going to be free of microorganisms when you use the term sterile. Disinfection, wherein you reduce the microbial load, especially by killing the pathogens. Sanitization, wherein you reduce the microbial load, infectious, non-infectious, doesn't matter, you're reducing the microbial load to an acceptable limit, which is put up by public health standards. Antisepsis, wherein you use a chemical agent on living organisms' body surface to prevent infection. And chemotherapy, wherein medications that are given to you to kill or inhibit the growth of microorganisms is referred to as chemotherapy. Please go through this video again if you feel that the terms are not yet clear. It's okay. It's fine to go through the content again. And in the next video, we will discuss more about chemotherapeutic agents. That's what is taking us towards our goal of discussing antimicrobial resistance. So stay tuned.